Good morning, friends. Welcome to Sutta study with Bhante Suddhaso. This morning we will be studying the Anaṅgana Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 5, and you can find the link in the live chat. And welcome to a few friends. Hello, Geeta, Grant, Michael, Ella, Jens, Edward, and Sarah. Welcome to you all. And welcome, of course, to Bhante Suddhaso. So I guess without further ado, we can start if Bhante puts the microphone on. Right?
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Good morning, friends. This morning we'll be going through the first half of the Anaṅgana Sutta, which is Majjhima Nikaya number 5, which is translated here as flawless. So as usual, I'll read through the sutta and I'll periodically give some explanations, and we'll stop about halfway through to take questions. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove at Anathapindika's park. There, Venerable Sariputta addressed the monks. Venerable monks! Venerable sir, those monks replied to Venerable Sariputta. Venerable Sariputta said this. Venerables, there are 4 kinds of people that can be found in the world. What 4? Here, Venerables, some person who has a flaw does not understand as it really is. I have an internal flaw. Here, Venerables, some person who has a flaw understands as it really is. I have an internal flaw. Here, Venerables, some person who is flawless does not understand as it really is. I do not have an internal flaw. Here, Venerables, some person who is flawless understands as it really is. I do not have an internal flaw. There, Venerables, regarding the person who has a flaw and does not understand as it really is, I have an internal flaw. Of the 2 people who have flaws, this one is declared the inferior person. There, Venerables, regarding the person who has a flaw and understands as it really is, I have an internal flaw. Of the 2 people who have flaws, this one is declared the best person. There, Venerables, regarding the flawless person who does not understand as it really is, I do not have an internal flaw. Of the 2 people who are flawless, this one is declared the inferior person. There, Venerables, regarding the flawless person who understands as it really is, I do not have an internal flaw. Of the 2 people who are flawless, this one is declared the best person. So just to summarize that a little bit, so Venerable Sariputta is saying that there's 4 kinds of people. So someone who has some internal flaw, but they're not aware of it. Someone who has a flaw and is aware of it. Someone who has no flaws, but is not aware of that. And someone who has no flaws and is aware of that. So 4 kinds of people. And he says that the best are the people who know whether or not they have flaws. Those are the best. The sutta continues. When this was said, Venerable Mahamoggallana said to Venerable Sariputta, what is the cause, Venerable Sariputta? What is the condition on account of which, of these 2 people who have flaws, one is declared the inferior person and one is declared the best person? And, Venerable Sariputta, what is the cause, what is the condition because of which, of these 2 people who are flawless, one is declared the inferior person and one is declared the best person? In other words, why is it so? Why are you saying that one person is better than the other? And Venerable Sariputta answers, there, Venerable, this is expected of the person who has a flaw and does not understand as it really is. I have an internal flaw. He will not produce interest, make an effort, and initiate energy for the abandoning of that flaw. He will die while he has lust, anger, delusion, flaws, and a defiled mind. Venerable, it is just like when a bronze dish is brought from a market or a metalsmith, which is covered with dirt and stains. The owner of that dish neither uses it nor cleans it and sets it down in a dirty place. In this way, Venerable, will that bronze dish on a later occasion be more defiled and stained? Yes, Venerable. In the same way, Venerable, this is expected of a person who has a flaw and does not understand that he has a flaw. So he will not make an effort to purify his mind, and he will die with a defiled mind. And then he says, there, Venerable, this is expected of the person who has a flaw and understands as it really is, I have an internal flaw. He will produce energy, make an effort and he will produce interest, make an effort and initiate energy for the abandoning of that flaw. He will die with no lust, no anger, no delusion, flawless, with an undefiled mind. Venerable, it is just like when a bronze dish is brought from a market or a metalsmith, which is covered with dirt and stains. The owner of that dish uses it and cleans it and does not set it down in a dirty place. In this way, Venerable, will that bronze dish on a later occasion be more pure and clean? Yes, Venerable. In the same way, Venerable, this is expected of a person who has a flaw and understands, etc. So here in the case of the two people who have flaws, the point that Sariputta is making is that if one doesn't recognize one's own defilements, one's own flaws, one's own errors, then one is not likely to make any effort to fix them. If you don't think there's a problem, then you won't try to fix the problem. But a person who clearly recognizes their flaws, their defilements, their errors, will make a sincere effort to overcome them, and therefore will make progress on the path towards awakening. Then in the case of the flawless people, and by the way here, flawless person clearly does not mean a fully enlightened person, but rather apparently someone who has let go of coarser defilements, coarser flaws, but who still has not yet attained enlightenment. So Sariputta says, there, Venerable, this is expected of the flawless person who does not understand as it really is. I do not have an internal flaw. He will pay attention to beauty. And because of his attention to beauty, lust will assault his mind. He will die while he has lust, anger, delusion, flaws, and a defiled mind. Venerable, it is just like when a bronze dish is brought from a market or a metalsmith, which is pure and clean. The owner of that dish neither uses it nor cleans it, and sets it down in a dirty place. In this way, Venerable, will that bronze dish on a later occasion be more defiled and stained? Yes, Venerable. In the same way, Venerable, this is expected of the flawless person who does not understand, and so on. And then the flip side, he says, there, Venerable, this is expected of the flawless person who understands as it really is. I do not have an internal flaw. He will not pay attention to beauty, and because of his non-attention to beauty, lust will not assault his mind. He will die with no lust, no anger, no delusion, flawless, with an undefiled mind. Venerable, it is just like when a bronze dish is brought from a market or a metalsmith, which is pure and clean. The owner of that dish uses it and cleans it and does not set it down in a dirty place. In this way, Venerable, will that bronze dish on a later occasion be more pure and clean? Yes, Venerable. In the same way, etc. So here he's talking about somebody who, again, they've removed the coarser flaws from their mind. They don't have major defilements operating. But in the case of the first person, because they don't recognize that they have something valuable, namely a relatively flawless mind, something which needs to be carefully protected, then that person is careless in how they direct their mind. So the example that's given here is paying attention to beauty. So focusing on things that we find appealing and pleasant and desirable. Because when we fixate on things that are desirable and appealing, then that has a tendency to strengthen our desire. There's a tendency to strengthen our craving, to strengthen our attachment. So that fuels our defilements. So this is one example. Elsewhere in the suttas, this is usually given as a list of several unskillful ways of directing attention. So one is paying attention to beauty, which then tends to spark desire. And this doesn't just mean beautiful people and sexual desire, though of course that's an obvious example, but anything pleasant and appealing which we have desire for. So for example, you walk in the kitchen and somebody's baked a cake. Well, of course you're aware that it's there and that's fine, but if you then turn and you start ogling at it and sniffing it and like, ooh, look at that lovely cake. Oh, yes, I really want to eat so fabulous, so delicious. Well, then what are we doing? We're fueling our desire. We're fueling our craving. So that's just going to keep building up our defilements. It's going to take us farther from enlightenment. But this also applies to the other defilements, so towards aversion. So fixating on things that we dislike, fixating on things that are unpleasant, fixating on things that we want to avoid. Well, that builds up our tendency towards aversion, our tendency towards irritation, our tendency towards rejection of experiences. So that also is defiling the mind, building up defilements of mind. Another example of this, by the way, is daydreaming or spacing out. So if we notice the mind is getting hazy and we're like, ooh, a hazy mind, that's kind of nice. We just let ourselves sink deeper into the haziness. Well, that's directing our mind in a way which builds up delusion. Or if we notice the mind is slipping into daydreaming, and we're just like, ooh, daydreaming, I like daydreaming. And we just let the mind slip deeper and deeper into daydreaming, then similarly, that's building up the tendency towards delusion. So while Sariputta particularly emphasizes paying attention to beauty, which increases desire, it applies equally to the other two main defilements, to hatred and delusion as well. So again, if somebody doesn't currently have coarse flaws, but they don't recognize that that's the case, they don't recognize that they've made progress, which needs to be carefully protected and preserved, then they might direct their mind in unskillful, inappropriate ways. So this is what's called wrong mindfulness, by the way. So right mindfulness is a factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, and in fact, one of us will be speaking about it this evening. No, tomorrow evening. This evening is monk chat. So right mindfulness is an element of the Noble Eightfold Path, which leads towards enlightenment. So that's directing the mind in a proper way, a way that reduces our defilements and builds up wisdom. Wrong mindfulness is directing our attention in a way that builds up our defilements and weakens our wisdom. So as in the cake example, we're directing our attention in a way that's building up our desire. So you might say in that case that your mindfulness is really strong. You're extremely mindful of the appearance of the cake. You're extremely mindful of the smell of the cake. You're extremely mindful of your overpowering craving for the cake. But that's wrong mindfulness because it's building up your defilements. It's directing your mindfulness in a way which is taking the mind away from enlightenment instead of towards it. So then the opposite case is somebody who they have no coarse flaws, but they recognize that that's the case. They recognize that their mind is relatively pure, and they recognize that this is something very valuable, something which is very important to preserve, to maintain, to protect. That if they're not careful, they're going to become a champion of backsliding, as we've been speaking about the last couple of days. So again, if there's one championship you don't want to win, it's backsliding. So this could be the new Olympic competition. So like who gets the gold medal in backsliding? Hopefully not you, and hopefully not me. That's not the kind of championship we want to win. So being very careful not to backslide, recognizing the progress that we've made and protecting it. Because until we attain awakening, backsliding is completely possible. In fact, a reflection I sometimes use is reflecting that over the course of samsara, throughout countless lifetimes without discoverable beginning, many, many times I have encountered Buddhism. I have practiced sincerely. I have gotten very close to stream entry, and then I stopped practicing well, and I backslid all the way to the beginning. How many times have I been so close, but I didn't realize how valuable that progress was. I didn't realize how important it was. I didn't protect it and maintain it and preserve it, and I slid all the way back to the beginning. So a friend of mine, so I have a friend who's a very athletic woman, and who also occasionally does personal training. And she has a friend of hers who's not athletic. And in fact, currently that person is quite massively overweight and unfit. But at one point in the past, the unfit friend asked the very athletic lady, please help me out. Help me get my exercise regimen under control so that I can get my body in shape, so I can get to a healthy weight, so I can be strong and fit and healthy. So the athletic friend of mine worked really hard with her friend for months and months and months, and got her friend to a point where her friend was actually quite slim and strong and healthy. But then within a short period of time, that friend reverted to her old habits of eating junk food and not exercising and not taking care of her body, and backslid all the way to being very overweight and unfit and unhealthy. So even though that person had worked hard and made progress on developing a healthy body, she didn't recognize the importance of protecting and maintaining and preserving that achievement. So she backslid all the way to the beginning. Of course, this is a mundane example. Spiritual practice is a much more important thing than physical fitness. But the principle applies the same way. We can put a lot of effort into carefully training our mind, building up really good virtuous habits, building up really strong samadhi, building up a very pure mind with very little lust, very little aversion, very strong mindfulness and clear awareness. And we can throw it all away if we're not careful. If we're not careful, then we'll start doing things which inflame our lust again. We'll start doing things which inflame our aversion. We'll start doing things which weaken our mindfulness and our clarity of wisdom. So we need to be very careful to protect the progress that we've made on the path so that we don't lose it, so that it doesn't diminish. So continuing, so at this point, Sariputta goes into some more description of what he means by flaw. So he says, Venerable, it is said, flaw. Venerable, what does this designation flaw refer to? So this is Moggallana asking Sariputta. And Venerable Sariputta replies, flaw is the designation which refers to that which is harmful, unwholesome domains of desire. So briefly speaking, anything which is harmful, unwholesome, and within the domain of desire. And so here gives some examples. And these are put in terms of monastic life, but the principle can also be extrapolated to those who are not monastics. But the first example here, he says, Venerable, it is possible that a wish like this might arise in some monk. If I commit an offense, may the other monks not know that I have committed an offense. However, Venerable, it is possible that the other monks will know about that monk. He has committed an offense. Thinking, the other monks know that I have committed an offense. He is disturbed and displeased. Venerable, that disturbance and that displeasure are both flaws. So this is the case where, again, particularly referring to monastics, so a monk commits an offense. That means they break one of the monastic precepts. And then they wish, may nobody find out about this. They don't want anybody to know that they made an error. Notice how this contrasts with the qualities of a stream enterer that we spoke about in the Kosambhya Sutta. In the Kosambhya Sutta, it says that if a stream enterer commits some offense, some error, then they will immediately go and reveal it to a trusted fellow practitioner, to their teacher or to a companion who they trust. So they won't make any effort to conceal it. They won't even have the desire to conceal it. Instead, they will openly reveal it in order to try to seek help, to try to get some assistance in overcoming their remaining defilements. So here, the mere fact that, in this case, the person wants to conceal their offense already indicates that they're not quite understanding the path. So if we have some unresolved problem, then we should be seeking help from our fellow spiritual companions, telling them, friend, I'm not doing very well at keeping my desire under control. I'm not doing very well at keeping my aversion under control. I'm giving into delusion or spaciness. Okay, we tell our trusted companions and we ask, can you help me deal with this? Can you help me get through this? Can you help me learn how to be a more wholesome practitioner, a more effective practitioner? So the fact that this person in this example wants to conceal their errors indicates that they don't quite understand that progress on the path is through openly acknowledging our errors and seeking help in overcoming them. And then when other people find out about this person's errors, then the person gets upset. It's like, oh, how terrible that somebody found out that I made a mistake. Like, well, no, it's really not such a big deal. Again, there's the mistake of identifying as one's error. It's like, oh, I am the person who broke a precept. Well, no, you're not. There was a precept broken in the past, but that doesn't define you. And if you have a sincere commitment to overcoming your defilements and not breaking precepts in the future, then it definitely doesn't define you. We all have mistakes in the past. We all have countless mistakes in the past. We all have countless lifetimes of the most vile, heinous acts in the past. So we all have a past of errors and mistakes. That's to be expected. But it doesn't define us unless we allow it to define us. If we're sincerely committed to becoming wise and compassionate, then our past errors are not who we are. So then getting all disturbed and upset because other people find out about our mistakes, again, that's not the path. The path is if other people find out about our mistakes, then it's like, yeah, it's true, I screwed up. I'm trying to do better. Maybe you can help me. Do you have any advice? Maybe you can offer some words of encouragement. So of course it's framed in terms of monks in this sutta, but also for lay people. If you break a precept, if you do something unwholesome, if you say something unwholesome, if you think something unwholesome, if you notice a pattern of unwholesome conduct, then it's good to go and talk to monastics or respected fellow practitioners. Talk to them and say, I've got this problem and I'm not doing a very good job on cleaning it up on my own. How can you help me work through this issue? And one does need to have some discretion here. So in the Vinaya, for example, it states that if there are no monks around who you trust, then you do not need to confess your offenses. If you believe that telling a monk would just lead to them launching a smear campaign or insulting you or making fun of you, but not actually to them trying to help you, then you do not need to tell them. You can keep your offenses secret if there is nobody who you trust enough to tell it to. But we need to be honest with ourselves if that's actually the case, or if we just don't want to reveal that we've made an error. We need to be honest with ourselves why we're not revealing something. The next example he gives, he says, Venerable, it is possible that a wish like this might arise in some monk. If I commit an offense, may the other monks reprimand me in private, not in the midst of the community. However, Venerable, it is possible that the other monks will reprimand that monk in the midst of the community, not in private. Thinking the other monks reprimand me in the midst of the community, not in private, he is disturbed and displeased. Venerable, that disturbance and that displeasure are both flaws. So here also is the case where one doesn't want to be reprimanded in public, which means you don't want other people to be aware. Maybe you've accepted that one person knows about your offense, but you don't want anybody else to find out about it. You want to be able to receive the admonishment privately, but that's not always the case. We don't always get what we want. Of course, if you're delivering an admonishment, one needs to carefully consider whether it's better to do so privately or publicly, and usually privately is better. But if we're on the receiving end, then whether it's private or public, then we need to recognize, first off, is there validity in the admonishment that's being given? Is there truth to it? Is there some valuable lesson for us to learn from it? And to do our best to receive it humbly, gratefully, peacefully. And if there's an error in our ways, then to try to amend our ways, to try to fix our misconduct. So I've seen this happen in monasteries where somebody was admonished publicly and received it with complete gracefulness. Even though the admonishment was not delivered in a particularly kind or respectful way, the person received it with complete gracefulness and courtesy. Like, oh, thank you. Yes, I'll do better. I've also seen the opposite, where it was received very ungracefully, but I'll leave those stories aside, as those stories are less inspiring and not what we're trying to do with our own lives. The next example, he says, Venerable, it is possible that a wish like this might arise in some monk. If I commit an offense, may I be reprimanded by a person who is my equal, not by a person who is not my equal. However, Venerable, it is possible that a person who is not his equal will reprimand that monk, not a person who is his equal. Thinking, a person who is not my equal reprimands me, not a person who is my equal, he is disturbed and displeased. Venerable, that disturbance and that displeasure are both flaws. So this also is the case of receiving admonishment and having particular requirements about how we can receive it. So I take this as particularly not wanting to be reprimanded by someone who we think is junior to us, someone we think is inferior to us. Maybe someone who's in monastic life, someone who's been ordained for only a short period of time, or someone whose practice we think is not very well developed, someone who we think is not as wise and compassionate as we are, someone who we think doesn't understand the Buddha's teachings as well as we do, someone who we think isn't as advanced in the practice as we are. So we don't want to be admonished by them. We don't want to be admonished because we think that they are inferior to us. So it's embarrassing when somebody who's inferior to you criticizes you, especially in public. It's not something that we necessarily like or want. But if they are offering valid advice in accordance with Dhamma, then we should be receptive to it. Even if the person actually is inferior to us in knowledge and practice, we should still be looking to see, is there valid advice in accordance with Dhamma? We should be looking to see, do I have something I need to learn, something I need to work on? The other case is someone who is our superior. So some people, they don't like to be reprimanded by someone who they perceive as their superior. So someone who's senior to them in monastic life, or someone who is a more advanced practitioner with more knowledge, more understanding, better virtue, better samadhi, and so on. So I've known a number of people like this who they don't like to be admonished by somebody who they perceive as ahead of them in the path. Again, it tends to bring out the sense of insufficiency, like I'm not good enough. I'm not like I'm this lesser being that's being spoken down to by a higher being. But once again, we need to set aside this whole comparison mind of who's better and who's worse, and rather just look at the admonishment itself and ask ourselves, is there something I can learn from this? Is there some benefit to be gained from the advice or the criticism that's being put forward? So it's now 8:30 and we're about halfway through the sutta, so maybe this is a good time to stop and switch to questions if there's any questions or comments.
Why? Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Mayel says, it's funny because I was slightly daydreaming when Bhante said daydreaming, so I came back to the present. And Michael says, your words regarding backsliding are well taken and very much appreciated. They apply to me. Don't worry, they apply to pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
You're in good company. And Bradley has a question. As a comment, it's like when you leave the monastery and go back to watching TV, going to dance parties and attending happy hour with half-price wine.
Oops.
Not what I'm planning to do, by the way. We hope not.
Yeah. I mean, this happens all the time, actually. Like people come to the monastery and they practice very sincerely in the monastery, and then they go back home and they stop meditating, they stop reading the suttas, they stop following the precepts, and then they wonder why their mind is a mess again within a couple of weeks. It's like, well, I know why your mind is a mess again. You know why your mind is a mess again. It's not surprising.
And Sarah says, I guess when you develop an aversion to flaws, a minor error can create a shame spiral.
Yeah, so we need to be careful about shame. So shame often contains a wholesome component, which is our conscience, our ability to recognize right and wrong, and our desire to cultivate wholesomeness. But it's mixed in with an element of self-hatred. And that's what's unwholesome. That's what makes it a poisonous mind state. So shame is not a desirable or admirable quality. It's not something that we want to build up or encourage in ourselves. So what's useful is, if you notice you're prone to shame spirals, as you call them, actively cultivate recollection of your own goodness. Delight in your own goodness. Delight in your own virtue and generosity. And remind yourself of how wonderful it is to practice virtue. Remind yourself of how wonderful it is to make progress on the path of spiritual practice. And encourage yourself to keep building up your practice. So rather than fixating on your flaws and drawbacks, instead fixate on your good qualities, your positive qualities, and build up a enthusiasm for good qualities, for wholesomeness. Okay?
And Michael says, as I listen to your reading of this sutta, I am put in mind of the Platform Sutra, which features polishing the mirror of our minds.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to learn to look closely at our own mind and objectively. Also, touching back on the previous question again, when we look at the qualities in our mind, it's important to recognize those qualities are not me. They're just things which are present in the mind. So whether what you see is wholesome or unwholesome, whether it's good or bad, it's still not me. It's just something that's present in the mind and which is subject to change. So it's kind of like if you walk in your room and there's dust on the floor, you don't think, I am dirty. You think there's some dust in my room. Maybe I should clean it up. Or maybe you don't want to clean it up and that might be how you like to live. But you walk in your room and there's some dust on the floor and you think, oh, there's some dust in the room. I should clean it up. But you don't think, I am dirty. I am a dirty person. I have always been dirty and I always will be dirty. How awful. Instead, you just think there's some dirt. Maybe I should clean it up. Well, it's the same. We look at the mind, and if we see some dirt in there, then we think, oh, there's some dirt in the mind. Maybe I should try to clean it up. But we don't think, I am dirty. I am a dirty person. I have always been dirty and will always be dirty, because those are not true statements. Everything is impermanent, including our defilements.
Right, and Liz is asking, is the bronze bull symbolic?
I just take the metaphor on face value, the simile. I just take it at face value. But I think bronze is an interesting example because when bronze is dirty and tarnished, then it's very dull, unappealing to look at. It's not very pleasant to look at. But when it's very clean, and well polished, then it's very bright and shiny. It's very beautiful. It actually looks almost like gold. When bronze is well taken care of, it looks almost like gold. And it's also extremely reflective. So people used to use bronze for mirrors because when bronze is very flat and very clean and well polished, then it will reflect whatever's in front of it. So that might be some of the implications of the bronze metaphor. But I take it, mostly I just take it at face value.
And Gita says, Bhante, this is a very long and slow process. Mindfulness is utmost importance. What more can we do in lay life to watch our unwholesome thoughts? It's very challenging when there are other family members are constantly around you. Should we walk away so as not to engage in unwholesome speech?
Sometimes that's the right choice, walking away. Sometimes gently trying to redirect the conversation towards the wholesome. Especially if your family are Buddhist, then you can start gently redirecting the conversation towards themes of Dhamma. Or just try to see how can you turn the conversation towards something more wholesome. But sometimes you just have to walk away. You have to step out of it. It's hard to change other people, especially when our own practice is not well developed, well advanced. So we always need to be very alert to what effect the surrounding conditions are having on our own mind. And if we really can't resolve a situation, then sometimes you just walk away.
All right, that was the last question. Gita says we're constantly trying. Hopefully get better. And unless something else comes up, maybe that's all for this morning.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bhante, for sharing the Dhamma. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you this evening for right mindfulness.
Great.
All right. Have a great